We believe, NADECO believes, that the February 25 to 26, 2023 election, the results, the hasty announcement of the results, are fundamentally at odds with the Nigerian election laws. And as Dr. Ogebi said very clearly, they didn't just violate rules, they violated their own laws. INEC glorified their efforts to make this the cleanest, the purest, the most transparent and fair election in Nigerian history, in African history. And yet, they violated every single fundamental tenet in every single law. They instituted the bimodal voter accreditation system. You've heard about that, the BVAS. All that is, make no mistake about it, there's a lot on the internet that seems to people want to believe that when you voted with the BVAS that recorded your vote and your vote was sent somewhere and it went to a server and it was tabulated and somehow Tinubu or the APC were able to hijack that electronic signal. That's not what happened. It was more pernicious than that. It was more old-fashioned than that.
NADECO alleges that the election results pronounced by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, on February 25 through 26, 2023, are fundamentally at odds with Nigerian election laws and constitute a wholesale disenfranchisement of Nigerian voters caused by the pervasive rot of Nigeria's increasingly kleptocratic political structure. NADECO demands that INEC draw back its curtains to let the full light of truth prove the transparency and veracity of the 2023 electoral process. NADECO hereby, as a first step, formally severs its relationship with Senator Bola Tinubu as a former founding member.
Una never see anything. Una dey see am. If it's about setting the record straight, I am not surprised. Not at all. Not surprised. The rejections will come. They are usual because you lost your ancestral home, your state of ancestral origin, Osun State. You lost your state of residence, that you have even been governor for 8 years and seemingly been told that you are the one that developed or even built the Lagos. You lost it. Plus and minus all the rigging that you did to ensure that you save face, you removed a lot of votes from the opposition that defeated you. You lost it. You lost the center of unity and of course the administrative power and state of this country, Abuja. You lost it. And now you lost several states across the regions of this country, the north, the south, the west. You even had to rig in Ekiti, that is traditionally in Yoruba land. You have to rig to get votes. That's the point we are raising. And now you are seeing rejections coming right, left, and center. Then you are surprised. If you are surprised, then I'm surprised at you. The truth of the matter is that it is going to be the bane of this government. And thank God it's only going to be for a few weeks. Because this embarrassment should not be allowed to last for even 6 months. Because we cannot even explain to sane minds how this man got himself into. You rigged yourself to power. And it's good. The INEC has driven themselves. The embarrassment the INEC is getting now, they deserve it. Because how can you explain to us that this process would even produce a winner like this? A man that his party is ashamed of. Go to Cross River State and other states in this country. Go to Delta State, where a man is saying that he won election. The candidate, the gubernatorial candidate of his party, they are using another candidate in the election to campaign to get him votes in their state. What else do you want to hear? Now, NADECO, thank you again. Thank you for standing for democracy. I know a lot of persons have been bullied to really congratulate him, and that's why I see few congratulations anywhere. Thank God for a few places where they have sense and they are saying no, this is an alright. We must correct the process. Allah Peter Obi said it. Before you are being called Your Excellency, the process that brought you to power must be excellent. We must review this process, and that's why we are going to court. Watch this video and share this video. It's embarrassing. These are the people that wants to lead us. God forbid Tinubu. I have always said it. He's not my president. I expect you to have won this election, and let me be dumbfounded that after all this you still won, but you have to rig yourself to power. And we must correct this with party primaries. All of you now, young people, must be to get to the primaries, because we will begin to allow illegal, illicit, fraudulent, scammed people like Tinubu to get into political space and buy their way and buy candidate and buy aspirant. Elections we will see this kind of elections, because these guys know they don't have any credibility. They will do anything. He who is on the ground fears no fool. When you expect somebody like that to be contesting, he's going to make it unequal. He's going to make it unequal. We must correct all this impression. Please share these videos. This very clinical analysis of what happened. And this is not coming from us, not obedient. Now, these people are not Peter Obi fans. They don't even belong to Labour Party. They don't know Peter Obi, so to speak. But they have gone to speak after observing the election. Share this video and make your opinion count. Let the video go viral. Let the whole world see the cry of our heart. In reality, if we have a competent judicial system, 24 hours is enough to cancel this election. Not 24 hours will be the reason to return the mandate to who won it. Because no, Tinubu is not it. Watch this video and share this video. Good morning.
The fact of the matter is that what was supposed to happen, and again, we are not partisan, NADECO is not partisan, but it appears as though the process, and that's what nations, that's what a democracy is. That's the greatness of America, is the process. It's not the people, it's the process. It's not the result, it's the process. How our government works, how our elections work. And the process of this election in the 2023 Nigerian presidential elections appears to be fundamentally flawed. We believe, NADECO believes, that the February 25 to 26, 2023 election, the results, the hasty announcement of the results, are fundamentally at odds with the Nigerian election laws. And as Dr. Ogebi said very clearly, they didn't just violate rules, they violated their own laws. INEC glorified their efforts to make this the cleanest, the purest, the most transparent and fair election in Nigerian history, in African history. And yet, they violated every single fundamental tenet in every single law. They instituted the bimodal voter accreditation system. You've heard about that, the BVAS. All that is, make no mistake about it, there's a lot on the internet that seems to, people want to believe that when you voted with the BVAS, that recorded your vote, and your vote was sent somewhere, and it went to a server, and it was tabulated, and somehow Tinubu or the APC were able to hijack that electronic signal. That's not what happened. It was more pernicious than that. It was more old-fashioned than that. All the BVAS does gave you two modes of identification, both your card, you put your voting card, your PVC in, and it also did your fingerprint and face identification. But it failed. And the reason BVAS was important is so that people couldn't vote more than once. Vote early, vote often. The reason it's important is so people could not vote that had fake cards. And on the issue of the PVC cards, INEC announced, this is INEC themselves, said that there were 87.2 million PVC cards collected. That was out of 93 million registered voters. So approximately 6 million people were registered. They just didn't bother to get their voting card. No one knows why. It just happens. But what's fascinating is, if you consider it true that 87.2 million people had PVC voting cards and could have voted, the declared winner of this election received 8.7 million votes. Now, out of 87 million, the math's not real hard. That means that Mr. Tinubu got 10% of the vote. He will be ruling the wealthiest economy in Africa with a mandate of 10% of the population. That's extraordinary. Something is seriously wrong. Something is seriously wrong. Additionally, we believe that what has to happen, and why we're here today, and NADECO is leading the charge, we believe that INEC has to prove itself. It has to prove the results it announced were true and were real. There are 176,600 polling stations. That's a lot of polling stations. INEC's rules required each polling station to collect the votes, count the votes, and they do it the old-fashioned way. They get the paper votes, they count them. They put them in stacks for each of the primary candidates. They were to gather those results, publish the local results, and then transmit the results, and ultimately they would go to Abuja and be certified. Well, what happened was they published some of the results early on, And then they took them down. And so what they have is something that looks a little bit like this, scribbling, when it used to look like this, where it was written. Someone didn't like the results. That's what appears to have happened. Dr. Ogebe observed it happening. So what we have is vote rigging, vote buying, and bribery. So despite INEC's efforts, nothing good happened. And we're back to the same old thing, the same old efforts. So what do we do? What do we do in the United States? What do we do as members of the diaspora? What do we do as international attorneys or international law folks? What do we do to ensure democracy can thrive? That the promise of 1960 can become true again, hopefully. Well, we are asking that INEC throw open the curtains and let the full light of truth come in to prove the transparency and the veracity of the results they've announced. If the results are true, they should be able to prove it. It is absolutely not extraordinary to ask them to prove it. Show me your math. We've all gone to school. Show me your math. You've got a number. Show me how you got to that number. Prove what you did. There can be no debate that the initial investigations indicate that they were savaged. The rules were savaged. The rights of the electorate were savaged. It was polluted by blatant and widespread corruption. And as Dr. Lloyd said, the four horsemen of democracy's doom, bribery, intimidation, insecurity, and vote rigging, appeared to trot and run roughshod all over the nation. They were harnessed to skew the results. We, NADECO, call upon the people of Nigeria to act peacefully, but to demand that proof be provided to them, that INEC prove the results they've announced. We also call upon the international community to join together with the Nigerian judiciary in a concerted effort to condemn and set aside the hastily announced results and instead proceed with the solemn seriousness this deserves. Again, one of the world's great nations is at peril here, continues to be at peril here. We need to make sure we don't continue to turn our back on Nigeria. And what we're asking for is very simple. Prove to us. Prove. NADECO says prove to us that if there is a Nigeria and there is a democracy in Nigeria, that it was arrived at lawfully and in accordance with the rule of law. The continuation of power by the ruling party is a wholesale disenfranchisement of Nigeria without more. That is little more than a dictatorship. And it's a new dictatorship. But it is nonetheless a dictatorship because it's imposed apparently against the will of the people. And we believe the will of the people of Nigeria must be preserved.
I bring you greetings on behalf of NADECO and the people of Nigeria. NADECO welcomes you to the first of its series of events planned over the next several weeks regarding the recently held presidential election in Nigeria. For those who are not quite familiar with NADECO, I'll give you a little bit about the group. The National Democratic Coalition, for short, NADECO, is Nigeria's premier and foremost pro-democracy group based here in Washington, D.C. It was initially registered in Nigeria in 1994 by a group of very prominent politicians and pro-democracy campaigners who needed a platform to fight the military regime of the infamous dictator General Sani Abacha after he took power through a military coup in November 1993 and reneged on his promises to hold elections and return Nigeria to democracy as was its birthright since obtaining freedom from British colonial rule on October 1, 1992. October 1, 1960. Sorry about that. A broad-based coalition transcending ethnic and religious lines was formed, which later gave birth to NADECO in Nigeria. No sooner had NADECO begun a peaceful resistance against the then military leader, General Sani Abacha, started to assassinate and jail its members. In order to save their lives, several of NADECO members fled into exile to neighboring African countries, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada. In 1995, those NADECO members who fled from Nigeria got together and registered a new NADECO in the United States. Since 1995, when NADECO was registered here in the US, it has continued to push for good governance and credible elections in Nigeria. NADECO alleges that the election results pronounced by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, on February 25 through 26, 2023, are fundamentally at odds with Nigerian election laws and constitute a wholesale disenfranchisement of Nigerian voters caused by the pervasive rot of Nigeria's increasingly kleptocratic political structure. NADECO demands that INEC draw back its curtains to let the full light of truth prove the transparency and veracity of the 2023 electoral process. It is without question that nearly all of the electoral reforms implemented to safeguard the 2023 Nigerian elections have been savaged by INEC and scattered to the winds of tyranny. It is beyond debate that initial investigation into the 2023 Nigerian presidential election discloses that Nigeria's most recent election is the polar opposite of transparency, fairness, and electoral integrity. This election was polluted by blatant bribery and widespread corruption. Even INEC itself has admitted to its abject failures to comply with the requisite transparency laws mandating real-time electronic transmission of election results from the polling units to the public, instead opting to cloak the electronic results in darkness before emerging with a declared rather than proved winner who is presently incapable of being fully embraced by the world. The INEC action clearly constitutes negligence per se and electoral fraud, as it violated the very statutory provisions and guidelines that are designed to protect against the type of fraud caused by its failure to transmit the results in real time. The people of Nigeria are supposed to be the ones the statute is designed to protect. Instead, they have found themselves at the receiving end of the resulting gross injustice. NADECO maintains that the 2023 presidential election is an attempt to disenfranchise the Nigerian people through the four horsemen of democracy's doom: bribery, voter intimidation, insecurity, and vote rigging, all harnessed to skew the results of the 2023 presidential election. NADECO calls upon the people and the judiciary of Nigeria and international community to join hands in a concerted effort toward global condemnation and absolute rejection of the hasty, hollow, and illegitimate result declared by INEC as being contrary to the will of the people and the rule of law. Here are some positions that NADECO has taken. NADECO is gravely concerned about the irregularities, voter intimidation, violence, the breach of the National Electoral Act, and most importantly, the abrupt and horrid pronouncement of the dubious 2023 presidential election results. This, in our viewpoint, signals a whole disenfranchisement of voters in Africa's largest nation. NADECO's goals and singular mandate have always been to fight for the rule of law and democracy in Nigeria as Nigeria's watchdog of democracy. NADECO hereby, as a first step, formally severs its relationship with Senator Bola Tinubu as a former founding member of NADECO USA for his participation in the worst electoral fraud in Nigeria's recent history. NADECO and Tinubu fought Abacha as the military dictator who scuttled the will of the Nigerian people in 1993 June 12 elections. Ironically, exactly 30 years later, in 2023, NADECO is fighting the same species of dictatorship, but only this time a much more dangerous civilian dictatorship, a kleptocracy mostly perpetuated by one of those who fought Abacha then. NADECO will not look the other way simply because the fraud was perpetrated by one of its founding members. NADECO urges the Biden administration to withhold any recognition of the product of the flawed elections. NADECO further entreats the U.S. Congress to introduce a resolution calling on the U.S. administration not to recognize the product of the election. It is the product of a poisonous tree. NADECO calls on the international community to support the empaneling of a team of internationally acclaimed technical experts to examine, interrogate, and analyze the INEC servers and beavers and all the other equipments that were used to extract the original votes and information. NADECO implores the Nigerian people and the judiciary of Nigeria, acting in concert with the international community, to join together in a concerted effort toward global condemnation and absolute rejection of the hasty, hollow, and illegitimate results declared by INEC as being contrary to the will of the people and rule of law. NADECO demands that the chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, must resign or be removed immediately. NADECO urgently requests that all countries worldwide, especially the United States, place an immediate visa ban upon Professor Mahmood Yakubu. NADECO solemnly exhorts the U.S. to not deviate from its democratic standards in Africa just because it fears competition with China and seeks to curry favor with illegitimate dictators who come to power through bribery, force, intimidation, and vote rigging. The U.S. should come out and condemn the apparent corruption of the electoral process and impose an immediate visa ban on those suspected to have compromised the polls. NADECO demands that President Buhari and INEC Chairman Professor Mahmood Yakubu should be held jointly and severally liable and accountable by the Nigerian courts and international community for what is currently happening across Nigeria in the days following the 2023 elections and for what would happen in the next few weeks or months should INEC's noxious banquet be forced down Nigeria's throats. These are the positions that NADECO would like to put out there for the international community. People in Nigeria are going to court, but we are appealing to the court of public opinion to see what happened in Nigeria. We're basically challenging the process, because the very law, Electoral Act, that was put in place to guide against what happened was broken. So the Nigerian people and international community would like to know why that was the case, because once that was broken, it means the protection that that Electoral Act provided for Nigerians was gone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming out today. As he mentioned, I am with the Diaspora Election Monitoring Observatory, and we were participant observers in the election that just held in Nigeria, or should I clarify, the sham elections that just held in Nigeria. I want to point out that as a participant observer, I traveled to my home state to participate in the elections, and the Beavers technology refused to accredit me, so I experienced disenfranchisement right there and then. I know that at least half a dozen of my family members who voted in 2019 were unable to vote this time because of the cash crunch that occurred in the economy. So there were systematic efforts to disenfranchise and intimidate or strangle voters from being able to participate. Well, you can imagine my shock after monitoring in Benue, Plateau, and FCT and seeing thousands of Nigerians peacefully coming out to vote, to see that the results were not uploaded. Now, just to show you the extent of the mischief that occurred, the results for the National Assembly elections, which occurred at the same time, simultaneously with the presidential results, were able to be uploaded, but the presidential election results were not uploaded. And till this day, as we speak, the results have not even been completely uploaded. What is even shocking is that we have seen photographs of individuals, a woman in a bathroom, uploaded supposedly as results on INEC's IRF page till this day. How can you elect someone on the basis of the photograph of a woman in the bathroom? I want to quickly mention that a lot of the international observers who were there were as disenchanted as I was. There were 4 African presidents, former presidents, who were in Nigeria to observe the elections. There were over 144,000 observers deployed across the country, and they all were disenchanted by what they saw. I want to say that what happened in Nigeria was not election observation, but a crime watch. We watched a crime being perpetrated on a country of 200 million people with utter and complete impunity. I also want to say that President Jimmy Carter has been vindicated. He went and observed elections in Nigeria many years ago, and he was so upset at the impunity and the brazen theft of the election that he vowed never to go back to Nigeria again. And as that distinguished president is in hospice care, he stands vindicated because Nigeria has refused to learn its lesson. One of the American observers that I spoke with mentioned 2 things. One, he said that, well, at least this election was better than the 2003 election.